Have you ever noticed how some people completely ignore your value until the moment you pull your energy away? The texts become slower, the attention disappears, the effort fades, and eventually something inside you changes. You stop over explaining. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes. You stop trying to force a connection that feels one sided, and strangely enough, that's when they suddenly notice you again. Welcome back to Woman's Secret Signals, the channel where we uncover the hidden psychology behind attraction, relationships, and emotional behavior most people never talk about. Today's topic is powerful because it reveals something many people learn too late. When you stop chasing someone, you change the emotional dynamic completely. At first, this person may have felt comfortable knowing you were always there. They knew you would text first. They knew you would forgive quickly. They knew your attention was guaranteed. And human psychology works in a very dangerous way when something feels guaranteed. People begin to unconsciously undervalue it. Not always because they are evil, not always because they want to hurt you, but because certainty removes emotional tension. When someone knows they never have to worry about losing you, they stop feeling the emotional urgency to protect the connection. But the second you stop chasing, everything shifts. Now suddenly they notice your silence, they notice your absence, they notice the emotional space where your energy used to be. And what happens next is incredibly revealing. Because when you stop chasing someone, you force them to confront a question they were avoiding the entire time. What if I actually lose this person? That thought creates emotional pressure, especially if your attention became part of their emotional routine. Many people don't realize how attached they are to your presence until your presence disappears. This is why people often come back right when you begin moving on. Not because they magically changed overnight, not because they suddenly became emotionally mature, but because your withdrawal created uncertainty. And uncertainty activates curiosity, anxiety, attraction, and emotional awareness all at once. The person who once acted distant may suddenly start watching your stories again. They may begin liking old posts. They may send random messages that seem small and harmless. Hey, how have you been? You disappeared. I was just thinking about you. But psychologically, these small actions reveal something much deeper. They are checking whether they still have access to you emotionally. Because the moment you stopped chasing, the power dynamic changed. And this is where most people make a huge mistake. The second the other person returns, they immediately go back to overgiving, over-explaining, and over-chasing again. They become so happy to receive attention that they forget why they walked away in the first place. But emotionally strong people do something different. They observe, they stop reacting emotionally to temporary attention. They stop confusing curiosity with commitment, and they begin paying attention to actions instead of words. Because when someone notices you stopped chasing, their next move tells you everything about their true intentions. Once this person notices you stopped chasing them, something interesting begins to happen psychologically. They start testing whether they still have access to you. This is one of the most common reactions in relationships, situationships, and emotional connections where one person became used to receiving constant attention. The moment your energy disappears, they feel the emotional imbalance immediately. And instead of directly admitting they miss you, many people begin with subtle emotional tests. They might suddenly text you something random after days or weeks of silence. Hey, stranger, you've been quiet lately. I saw something that reminded me of you. Notice what's happening here. They're not necessarily trying to rebuild the relationship yet. They're trying to measure your emotional availability. In simple terms, they want to know, can I still reach this person whenever I want? Because before, the answer was always yes. You responded instantly. You made yourself emotionally available. You chased conversations. You carried the emotional effort. But now, things feel different. And that difference creates tension inside them. Human beings are deeply affected by emotional patterns. When someone becomes accustomed to your attention, your absence feels psychologically loud. Even if they acted detached before, Your silence interrupts the emotional certainty they relied on, so they begin checking if the connection still belongs to them. This is why people often return with low effort communication at first. They may not fully commit, they may not apologize, they may not suddenly transform into the perfect partner. Instead, they throw out emotional breadcrumbs, small messages, tiny reactions, random attention. Why? Because they're trying to see how quickly you respond emotionally. And this moment is extremely important because your reaction teaches them how much access they still have to your emotions. If you immediately return to chasing, they subconsciously learn something dangerous. No matter how little effort I give, I can still keep this person emotionally attached. That's why emotionally unavailable people sometimes keep coming back without ever truly changing. The cycle continues because the emotional dynamic never changes. But when you remain calm, grounded, and emotionally controlled, now they begin feeling uncertain, and uncertainty changes behavior. Suddenly, they start thinking more about you. Suddenly, they wonder who else has your attention. Suddenly, they become more emotionally alert because they can no longer predict you. This is where attraction psychology becomes very powerful. People value what feels emotionally meaningful and emotionally at risk of being lost. That doesn't mean you should play manipulative games or pretend not to care. Real emotional strength is not about manipulation. It's about self-respect. There's a difference between loving someone and emotionally chasing someone who gives inconsistent energy. And many people don't realize this until they finally stop over-pursuing. That's when they discover something shocking. The person who seemed emotionally distant often starts trying harder once they realize your attention is no longer guaranteed. But here's the deeper truth most people miss. Not every return means genuine love. Sometimes people come back because they miss control. Sometimes they come back because they feel rejected. Sometimes they come back because your absence bruised their ego. That's why you must watch actions carefully. Are they becoming consistent? Are they communicating clearly? Are they putting in effort they never gave before? Or are they simply checking whether you're still emotionally waiting for them? One of the biggest psychological shifts happens when this person realizes something unexpected. You're no longer emotionally revolving around them. And that changes everything. Before, your attention was predictable. They knew you were thinking about them. They knew they could disappear and still find you emotionally available later. But once you stop chasing, you create emotional mystery. And mystery creates curiosity. Now they start wondering questions they never asked before. Why did they suddenly pull away? Are they talking to someone else? Did they finally move on? Why do they seem happier without me? This is where many people suddenly become highly observant. They start checking your social media more often. They notice changes in your behavior. They pay attention to your confidence. Even your silence begins speaking loudly to them. Why? Because your energy changed. And energy is powerful in relationships. When someone constantly chases another person, they unintentionally communicate emotional dependence. But when they finally focus on themselves, regain emotional balance, and stop forcing attention, they begin radiating something much more attractive: self-control. That energy feels different. You're no longer trying to convince someone to choose you. You're no longer over-explaining your worth. You stop begging for consistency. And ironically, that emotional detachment often makes people see your value more clearly than before. Because people often overlook what is constantly available to them, but when access becomes uncertain, appreciation increases. This doesn't just happen in dating, it's basic human psychology. We become more aware of something once we feel its absence. And suddenly, the person who ignored your effort starts paying attention to details they once overlooked: your confidence, your independence, your emotional calmness. Now they become curious, and curiosity is dangerous because it slowly pulls them back emotionally. This is why some people who once seemed cold suddenly begin acting warmer after you detach emotionally. They may start initiating conversations more, they may compliment you more often, they may even try to remind you of old memories to rebuild emotional connection. But notice something important here. They're reacting to the version of you that stopped chasing. That's the irony. The more you tried to force their attention before, the less impact you had emotionally. But when you stopped over pursuing and returned your focus to yourself, your emotional value increased in their eyes. Because confidence is attractive, neediness pushes people away, self respect pulls people closer. And this is the lesson many people learn too late in relationships. You cannot force someone to value you by giving more and more pieces of yourself away. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is step back and let your absence speak. Because silence reveals things that chasing never will. Silence reveals who truly cares. Silence reveals who notices your absence. Silence reveals who only loved your attention versus who genuinely valued you. And this is where the emotional tables begin turning. Because now the person who once felt emotionally powerful starts feeling uncertain themselves. They begin wondering if they still matter to you. When someone realizes they're genuinely losing access to you emotionally, their behavior often changes in ways that surprise you. Suddenly, the person who barely texted first begins reaching out consistently. The person who seemed emotionally unavailable suddenly wants deeper conversations. The person who acted comfortable keeping distance now starts finding excuses to stay connected. Why? Because emotional certainty is gone. And once people feel they might truly lose someone, survival instincts inside relationships begin activating. They start paying attention to the connection in ways they ignored before. This is where many people suddenly begin doing things they never did when you were chasing them. They may compliment you more, respond faster, act more protective, become jealous unexpectedly, ask personal questions, try to spend more time with you. Sometimes they even bring up emotional topics they avoided for months. And psychologically, this happens because your withdrawal disrupted the emotional comfort zone they had grown used to. Before, they didn't need to fight for your attention. Now they do. Before, they assumed you would always stay emotionally available. Now they're unsure, and uncertainty creates emotional urgency. This is especially true for people who secretly enjoyed your validation. They may not have fully appreciated you when your energy was freely available, but once your attention disappears, they suddenly feel the emotional emptiness you left behind. That's when effort appears. But here's something extremely important you must understand. Effort created by fear of losing you is not always the same as genuine emotional growth. And this is where emotionally intelligent people separate themselves from emotionally reactive people. Because when someone suddenly changes after you stop chasing, you must ask yourself one question. Are they changing because they value me or because they're afraid of losing control over my attention? There's a huge difference. Some people return temporarily because they miss the emotional benefits you provided, your reassurance, your loyalty, your attention, your emotional support. But once they feel secure again, they slowly return to old patterns. That's why consistency matters more than emotional intensity. Anybody can act interested for a few days when they feel you slipping away, but real emotional maturity shows up through repeated actions over time. Do they communicate differently now? Do they take accountability? Do they finally match your energy consistently? Or are they simply reacting emotionally because they feel rejected? Because sometimes people don't actually miss you. They miss being wanted by you. And that truth can save you from repeating painful cycles. This is why stopping the chase becomes so powerful psychologically. It forces hidden intentions into the light. When you constantly pursue someone, you often never discover how much effort they're truly willing to give on their own. But when you step back, their actions begin exposing their real emotional investment. Some people rise up and fight for the connection. Others disappear once they realize they're no longer being emotionally fed for free. Both outcomes are valuable because either you finally receive the effort you deserved, or you finally see the truth clearly enough to move on. At the end of all this, something deeper happens inside you. You begin realizing that chasing someone can never create genuine love. It can create temporary attention. It can create emotional dependence. It can even create attachment. But real connection? Real connection happens when two people willingly choose each other without one person constantly forcing the relationship forward. And the moment you stop chasing, you finally see the truth clearly. You see who reaches back. You see who notices your silence. You see who values your presence enough to make an effort without being begged. That clarity is powerful. Because many people spend years exhausting themselves emotionally trying to prove their worth to someone who already made their priorities clear through actions. They overgive, overexplain, overlove, overweight. And somewhere in the process, they slowly abandon themselves. But when you stop chasing, something incredible happens. You reconnect with your self respect. You stop measuring your value by someone else's attention. You stop panicking every time communication changes. You stop feeling responsible for carrying the entire emotional weight of the connection. And ironically, that emotional independence often makes you more attractive than ever before. Because confidence changes your energy completely. You no longer approach relationships from fear. You stop thinking, how do I keep this person interested? And you start asking, is this person even worthy of my emotional investment? That mindset shift changes everything. Because emotionally healthy people don't beg for consistency, effort, or basic respect. They recognize that mutual interest should feel natural, not forced. And this is the lesson most people learn only after heartbreak. The right person will not require endless chasing to see your value. Yes, healthy relationships need effort from both sides, but there's a difference between mutual effort and emotional one-sidedness. If someone only notices your value once you walk away, pay attention carefully. Sometimes people truly wake up and realize what they almost lost. Sometimes distance genuinely creates emotional awareness and maturity. But sometimes people only react because they miss access to your attention. Your job is not to become bitter. Your job is not to play manipulative games. Your job is to observe patterns, protect your peace, and choose relationships where effort flows both ways. Because the strongest people are not the ones who chase endlessly. The strongest people are the ones who can walk away from inconsistent energy without losing themselves emotionally. And once you understand that, your entire relationship life changes. You stop forcing connections that drain you. You stop begging for clarity. You stop shrinking yourself just to keep someone interested. And suddenly people begin treating you differently. Not because you became cold, but because you finally understood your worth. So if someone noticed you stopped chasing and suddenly changed their behavior, don't rush emotionally. Watch carefully, because what they do next will reveal whether they truly value you or whether they only valued the comfort of knowing you would always chase them. And that difference can change your entire future in relationships. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Woman's Secret Signals for more deep insights into attraction psychology, relationships, and human behavior. And remember, the moment you stop chasing the wrong people, you make space for the right ones to find you.